In most societies, leadership is still gendered masculine. You know, the way we think about race, sex, other fundamental characteristics of human beings is imprinted in us very early in life. When I had political retirement thrust upon me in 1993, the good news was that I now had the leisure to begin to read an extraordinary body of literature that discusses how gender plays out in society. And much of that literature is based on research in cognitive psychology that points out that from the very moment that we are born, as human beings, we begin to create patterns so that we can understand the world. If we had to consciously reason out every stimulus, every experience that we had every day, we would never get out of bed. Therefore, part of our cognitive development as young children, going back to when we're babies, is to begin to create patterns that enable us to respond reflexively in the world. And among the patterns that we develop, the reflexes that we create, are those that tell us what are the appropriate roles for those who are male and those who are female. Now, I am a long-time advocate for women. When I became Justice Minister of Canada, I described myself publicly as a feminist, and there was an audible intake of breath across the country. People got over it. But the point is, I took this test, and what I discovered when I took the gender test was that by a considerable margin, I actually associated men with science more than women with science. Now, this doesn't mean that consciously I oppose women being scientists. It means that I am a reflection of a culture in which most of the scientists that I have encountered or seen in the newspaper in the course of my life have been male. And so my reflex, before I get a chance to engage my conscious values, sees men as scientists more than it sees women as scientists. In the United States, women leaders are often rendered invisible. The White House Project, a project based in Washington, which is determined, obviously, to get a woman in the White House, but does wonderful research. The White House Project did a media survey of the Sunday morning news shows in the United States. And they surveyed them between January the 1st, 2000 and June the 30th, 2001. They found that the ratio of men to women as guests on the Sunday morning news shows, which are very influential, was 9-1. Is that because there were no women? What was interesting is that these shows were more likely to feature out-of-power men than in-power women. So the former male chairs of both the Republican and Democratic senatorial campaign committees were on these shows 24 and 16 times respectively. But the current female chair, the actually operative female chair of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Senator Patty Murray, was not on at all. She was invisible, even though she was the one who was responsible. The media were more interested in hearing from men who were no longer in the position. After 9/11, the ratio of women to men on these very important news shows got even worse, 13-1. The Senate's 3 principal subcommittees on terrorism at the time were all chaired by women. None were invited to appear on talk shows. Nor was Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson, the ranking member of the Senate Commerce Committee's subcommittee on aviation. Nor was Nancy Pelosi, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. In 1996, I received an invitation to join an organization called the Council of Women World Leaders. It may interest you to know that there are 34 living women who are or have been president or prime minister of their country. How many can you name? I often go to gatherings where I say, I'll give you $100 to anybody who can name all 34, and my $100 is safe. The goal of the Council of Women World Leaders is to make women leaders visible, to keep them on the radar screen, to make it possible for young women to know that around the world, women have led countries. They have led national governments, often in very heroic and constructive circumstances. Do you know that Prime Minister Hanna Suchotka of Poland led Poland through its most difficult period of economic reform? Her party actually lost power for making the tough decisions, but it is as a result of her government's leadership that Poland is in the kind of good economic situation that it is. We use a combined cachet of our titles to open doors for other women. In partnership with other international organizations, we bring together high-level women policymakers, cabinet ministers from around the world. And those ministers now form a second-tier organization, the International Assembly of Women Ministers, chaired by Madeleine Albright. But many young women have no opportunity to know that around the world women are making important policy decisions, are leading governments. Where do they find out about them? Because once they're out of office, they drop off the radar screen. Why? Because leadership is gendered masculine. Women who are leaders are flukes. They're temporary aberrations, as opposed to being important and permanent members of a growing body of international female leadership. Women of my generation were told that it was enough just to be good at what we did. And many of them were extraordinary. And some of them have even achieved significant positions. But we still fight against the invisibility. We still fight against the tendency to see us as not really belonging in those positions. And yet we know, because we see this around the world, that the presence of women in decision-making positions improves the quality of that decision-making. It is not because women are better than men, but because they bring a different experience and in many ways live a different reality from that of men. And you cannot govern the human race by hearing only one half of its voices.